Mr. President, I come to the floor to pay tribute to Reverend Dr. Samuel B. McKinney, a civil rights icon from the Pacific Northwest. In August of 1963, Martin Luther King Jr. inspired a nation from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial here in Washington, D.C., boldly proclaiming that now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. Meanwhile, in the basement of Mount Zion Baptist Church in Seattle, Washington, Dr. Samuel McKinney was already taking up that cause. He stood before his fellow religious leaders, pastors, rabbis, priests, and asked them to join him in the struggle for equality and justice for all. And for more than 40 years, he never gave up the fight, advocating for economic and social justice in Seattle, Washington, and throughout our nation. Refusing to yield to the deep-seated prejudice and threats of violence, he became known as a visionary civil rights leader, a pillar of Seattle's civic life, and a moral consciousness of our community. Tomorrow, many Washingtonians will come together to celebrate Dr. McKinney's life, to remember his wisdom, his advocacy, his deep and unshakable belief in justice, his steadfast commitment to his community and to his church, his service to our nation in the United States Air Force, and his devotion as a husband, a father, and friend. He was a third-generation Baptist minister. He took up the struggle for justice at an early age. He was inspired by the prowess of Jesse Owens and Joe Louis and civil rights leaders of our generation, and no influence was more profound than the sermons of his own father. The Reverend Dr. Wade McKinney never shrank from an opportunity to use his pulpit to fight back against racism and segregation. And decades later, from his own pulpit at Mount Zion Baptist Church in Seattle, Dr. Samuel McKinney continued his father's efforts. He repeatedly fought back against injustice in every form, leading civil rights marches in the 60s, protesting school segregation in the 70s, and demonstrating against apartheid in the 80s. He led boycotts against companies that refused to hire black workers and develop and promoted workforce training programs for people who were struggling to find employment. He protested unfair education policies and started an accredited preschool and kindergarten program that helped establish the first black-owned bank in Seattle. And he served as an original member of the Seattle Human Rights Commission, helping to pass our city's first Fair Housing Act. Dr. McKinney also brought, through his leadership, to the national stage Dr. Martin Luther King's only visit to Seattle in 1961, featured in this historic photo. He also, Dr. McKinney, participated in the Selma to Montgomery Voting Rights March in 1965. In 1980, he was arrested for speaking against apartheid at the South African consulate in Seattle. And at 86 years old, Dr. McKinney was still fighting back against injustice, speaking at the prayer vigil of Seattle for Trayvon Martin. So Dr. McKinney's legacy does live on through the courage of his actions, his visionary leadership, and his quest for justice. But perhaps most of all, his legacy lives through the extraordinary community that he built at Mount Zion Church. It was at Mount Zion that he mentored fellow ministers, imparted inspirational guidance. It's where he baptized newborns, presided over weddings, and helped families bury their loved ones, and maintained his steadfast commitment to parishioners. At Mount Zion, he raised his two daughters, Dr. Laura Ellen McKinney and Rhoda McKinney Jones. Along with his wife, they made sacrifices for the community. She, too, was a savvy, strong supporter of education and the arts. Under Dr. McKinney's leadership, Mount Zion flourished and tripled its membership. His church and his community stand as a true testament to Dr. McKinney's life and what it meant in Seattle. Today, it shows the enduring faith that drove him in all that he did. Dr. McKinney made this fight for justice and equality his lifelong mission. Another picture shows him with Jesse Jackson, who I believe also came to Seattle at Dr. McKinney's request. But Dr. McKinney made the fight for justice in Seattle and helped impact our nation. His leadership and dedication to the community will be sorely missed. And as I said, tomorrow, many Washingtonians will be there to commemorate his life along with his daughters and many of his people from Mount Zion. As we honor and remember Dr. McKinney's life and advocacy, I am reminded of a fitting quote from Dr. Martin Luther King. Quote, "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy," end quote. In good times and through difficult ones, Reverend McKinney stood on the side of justice. And for that, all of us in the Pacific Northwest are grateful. I thank the President. I yield the floor.